This week in Texas, politics is closing out with a freeze warning, but it kicked off with the end of college football. Good thing that political football is still being played. And with that in mind, let's get our headlines for the week from our panel. And we'll start first with Holly Hansen with the Texan News. Holly, what's your headline for the week?
Well, the cold may be coming, but the heat is on for Texas primaries, parental choice, and Paxton.
Business analyst Annie Spillman, what's your headline for the week?
Texas is U-Haul's top growth state for the third consecutive year.
And political analyst Mark Wiggins. Mark, what's your headline for the week?
Winter is coming, but will the Texas grid be ready?
Now, Governor Greg Abbott kicked off the week by announcing that he will use a big campaign donation haul-in to target fellow Republicans who did not support his big dollar private school scholarship school choice idea. Mark, you crunched some of those numbers. What caught your eye?
Well, Rudy, money was never really the issue here. The voucher supporters have always outspent the public education folks by millions of dollars. What I think is noteworthy is that the majority of that money you're going to find came from a handful of major donors and lobby groups while the special sessions were actively underway. Remember, we were in special sessions for the entire second half of last year, and you're not allowed to accept contributions during a regular session to avoid the appearance of impropriety, but there's no rule about that during special sessions.
You know, that money from Governor Abbott sure can buy a lot of ads, but Holly, the numbers that I'm seeing is that he's not going to be able to flip the number of seats that he needs. What are you seeing?
Well, I don't think you should ever underestimate Greg Abbott's ability to get out there on the campaign trail and make persuasions. There's an important reason that the Republicans chose John Rainey to introduce that school choice killing bill in the fourth final special session of the legislature this year, because Rainey is not up for re-election. He is retiring. Polls show that supporters of school choice are surging, even amongst minority communities. And this is going to be a key issue going into some of the primary races. We didn't get a lot of media attention on the issue, but in the last election cycle, several Republicans were primaried successfully from the State Board of Education because of their stance on kind of the school choice light issue, which is charter schools. So I think we're going to see a tough battle coming ahead for these Republican primary races.
I still think it comes down to the definition of what is school choice and what is a new entitlement program. Annie, what are you hearing from the business community?
Well, listen, the business community sticks with business and industry issues and tries not to veer off path. Workforce development in schools is critical and, is about as in the weeds as the business community gets when it comes to education. And, Governor Abbott has always been a big proponent when it comes to business issues in Texas. And that doesn't mean that he can't have other priority issues, obviously. As far as his involvement in some of these other races, I'll tell you that the business community will involve themselves in those races. And if those people had good voting records when it came to business issues, then those business and industry lobby will likely endorse in those races. And I will say that the Governor Abbott has never been one of those politicians that would punish a business and industry group for endorsing in a race that he might not be endorsing in or endorsing against. And so that's always been appreciated. The business community, they stick with the people that vote with them and try not to get involved into the inner politics of the matters.
You agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment.
What about you, Holly?
Yeah, I agree.
It's dangerous. I still think it's dangerous ground, don't you guys, right now? It's just how this school choice fight's going to play out.
I think it has such popular support. Again, all the polling shows that, Texans supported across the nation. And you even see support coming from communities that are traditionally going to vote Democrat. So I do think it's going to be a big issue in these primary races.
I'd say, I'd counter that and say most of that polling has been polling that's been conducted by the pro-voucher groups. And when you dig down into the details, the intensity of support for vouchers is very low. And I don't think that it's going to factor tremendously into many of these primary elections, because when you talk to primary voters, Republican primary voters, which I do all the time, what you hear more about is the Paxton vote than the voucher vote. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see in the handful of races where the Paxton candidate is on the other side of the voucher candidate, which one of those horses wins.
What are you hearing? You're going to say something, Holly? Go.
I was just going to say one of those polls is the University of Houston, which I don't see as particularly pro-voucher, but they're fairly even.
Annie, I'm going to go back to you with the business community. Which one are they paying attention? Is the business community paying attention to either one, Paxton and school choice, or do they just want low taxes?
I think right now they've just got their popcorn out, sort of laughing, because, I've done sort of a straw poll with a bunch of my lobby friends in the business and industry communities. And I said, on one hand, is this race, are the races where the governor is endorsing against going to change what your PAC does in endorsing in those races? And they said, absolutely not. If they've if any of these Republican House members have been with us, we're going to stick with them. And then conversely, is this going to change what your PAC does in endorsing the governor? And it said, absolutely not. Again, if the governor's been with us, then our PAC's going to endorse them. So when it comes to the business community, they're staying out of the fray.
The border crisis remains a hot topic and in the news. An interesting sidebar story was reported by the Texan News, Holly Hansen, matter of fact. It involves a fight over the county judge in Harris County wanting to include illegal immigrants in their new guaranteed income program. Holly, that's your story. What's your readers reacting? How are they reacting?
Well, the readers are already a little bit concerned about this idea of universal basic income, giving a $500 a month stipend to some individuals with no strings attached. It is a limited program. They are using COVID federal relief funds to fund that. And there's a question about what happens when those funds run out. But the other thing we saw happen this week is county commissioners going into a closed door session to discuss eligibility. And there is a federal prohibition against giving these federal dollars to those who are in the country illegally. What they may be trying to do, though, is circumvent that rule by letting a nonprofit organization, incidentally, the same one that operates the Cook County, Illinois program in Chicago, because those nonprofit organizations are not required to ask about resident status when giving out benefits. So whether or not they will be able to do that remains to be seen. The commissioners are talking about possibly doing a second wave and using some other funding mechanism to offer that to those in the country illegally. That is a concern in Houston, Harris County, where we're already concerned about rising crime and drug trafficking that is coming from what has been a very uncontrolled southern border.
It's an interesting twist to the debate. People support safety nets and trying to help folks out, but then this also smacks of a magnet in regards to attracting migrants, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think what you're going to continue to see is, even with the, or perhaps especially with some of the border issues, there's this ongoing sort of battle between the statewide electeds and local government. And there's a political dimension to that as well. And I think the border issues set up really nicely to kind of play into that when you're talking about the various different programs that are being conducted at the municipal level. So, as long as the city and county folks have a different approach to this than the statewide folks, I think you're going to continue to see some conflict there.
Yeah, the conflict isn't just with city and county, it's city, county, state. Latest development happening just down in the Eagle Pass area, new twist. Thursday, we learned that the state of Texas seized some parkland in Eagle Pass. Annie, this is land that sparked a controversy last year between the state and the city over trespassing and arresting migrants at cross. Is this a private property rights battle? Is this a business saying, hey, look, you can't do these to this place? What's your reaction to that?
Right. Well, like you said, it's tricky because in June of last year, you'll recall the Eagle Pass mayor signed an emergency declaration declaring that this Riverside park that borders Mexico and the city, he declared the park private property, but then quickly rescinded it only a couple of months later. And so it's since been city-owned public property. But at the time, the mayor interestingly said, this should not be our decision to make in closing the park. This should be one of the federal government. So in saying that, and Governor Abbott's contention that President Biden isn't doing anything, that now it's the state's responsibility, and so you've now seen that they've seized this park. It's sort of incumbent on the state, right, to take over this park and to protect the state's citizens. I've seen that the state has given time for Border Patrol agents to take their property off of this now seized park. I think what we'll see probably likely is another suit from the federal government, and likely even legal aid attorneys coming in. I'd be interested to see the way this plays out, but I think I know that Governor Abbott and his attorneys are very smart, and they wouldn't have made this move without playing a little chess beforehand.
Yeah, definitely a chess game, because, right before this, the federal government took over that park. I remember seeing all the images, mass of people. So it's not exactly an open public park. The federal government took it over, the state took it over, the city's got it back. It's still the epicenter, right, Holly? That's where a lot of people are crossing over. So is this just a symbolic punch?
I don't think so. I think it is strategic. I think that the state is looking at ways to strategically handle what's happening at the southern border. Look, it's an incredible source of frustration for state leaders when the federal government just really doesn't seem very interested in getting control over what's happening at the border. We can see just about every day footage that's being taken by different media outlets, including Fox, yourself. Bill Melgren has done a great job of documenting what's happening, and we're seeing the footage of just thousands and thousands of people pouring across that border, sometimes 12,000 in a day. If the state is going to act, they've got to be strategic, and I think this is just part of a larger, broader policy.
Mark, isn't this still a bad gamble for the Democrats going into the primaries, going into the general election, making this stance of what seems to be an open border stance?
Well, what we know is that the border security is an incredibly potent election issue. And as we are in an election year, we are going to continue to see, every instance of some kind of activity at the border. It's going to be a super high profile event. And so I would expect that we're going to continue to see that. We're going to continue to see candidates on either side of the issue continue to make hay of what's happening at the border. And it is going to be a fixture of our news cycle from now through November.
And Rudy, I had a thought, and I need to kind of do a little bit more digging, but previously last year, before HB4 was passed, under the penal code, when there was criminal trespass through this park, they would detain these folks. They would, have to await trial to then be sent back. But then under HB4 that was passed before the end of the year, you were detained and then you were sent back. So not to await trial. So just interested to see how that plays out. Does HB4 now kick in? They are immediately arrested and they're sent back. I don't know.
Yeah, given the choice, go to jail or go back to the bridge and cross back over. And now we got the federal government suing the state over that. A Texas nationalist group this week asked the state Supreme Court to make the Republican Party of Texas to ask voters if the Lone Star State should go it alone again. GOP Chairman Matt Rinaldi called the push for a non-binding Texic idea, a move that could open the door for Democrats who want electronic voter registration and mail-in ballots, looser restrictions on that. Mark, it seems Rinaldi has only himself to blame for all this, with all this extreme position swirling around the Texas GOP. What's your assessment?
Well, he does raise an interesting technical point about that lawsuit, but I do think you're right, Rudy. Texas, though, is part of the state party platform, which is something that the Republican Party of Eisenhower and Reagan would find incomprehensible. But this is the kind of stuff that the state party is focused on right now instead of supporting incumbents and growing its base. And that does start at the top.
Distraction or, worth the discussion there, Holly?
Well, I think it is something of a distraction. I think that Rinaldi made the right call in thwarting this, and of course, the Supreme Court has sided with Rinaldi. There is a large push to disassociate from some of these groups that are more controversial, with limited success, but some successes, and some of that has been misreported, unfortunately.
Texas has one of the most powerful economies in the world, but Annie, I can't think that the business community supports pulling out of the union, right?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, you have to think about it on a macro level for sure, because there's so many programs where there's match dollars involved, and I can think of it with the small business development centers that really help our small businesses, and that's through the SBA, the Small Business Administration, that's federally funded, and our economic development centers. There's so many programs that really help our entrepreneurs and our small business owners, that are match funded, federal state dollars. And so goes the state of Texas being a part of the union, and so goes those programs.
State Supreme Court is getting a workout like the Alabama Defensive Unit during the playoffs, being asked to step up again. Attorney General Ken Paxton trying to block an order to have him deposed in the whistleblower lawsuit against him. Holly, have you seen any indication that this fight is going to factor into any of the GOP primaries?
Oh, I think it is going to factor. Look, the impeachment push last year, which was instigated by the OAG's attorney in the whistleblower lawsuit, Bill Helfand, expecting the state lawmakers to approve a $3.3 million settlement, when the settlement wasn't necessarily clearly fully vetted. Now, trying to impeach before all these issues are adjudicated was a real problem for a lot of Republicans, even who thought perhaps there were some fire behind all of the smoke. Now, I think we are going to be learning more. We will see depositions from Paxton and some of his key staffers, and this may exonerate the attorney general, or it may prove that he's culpable here. So I think this is a good move in the interest of finally getting to the bottom of things and finding out what really happened. Of course, it's going to play into the primaries, as we mentioned earlier. You have some races on the Republican side where Governor Abbott has endorsed one candidate and Paxton has endorsed a different candidate. We're definitely going to see a clash there as to whether or not people are more worried about these policy issues the governor supports, or whether or not they're more worked up about impeachment and whether or not it should have happened.
Paxton ends up testifying in being deposed. What he's going to say is going to be leaked to the media. Mark, wouldn't it be better to go ahead and do it now, get it through the news cycle now, instead of waiting until spring?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Rudy, I think when you talk to the Republican primary voters, this Paxton issue is, they're way more fired up about this than some of the other issues like vouchers. And it's going to be, as Holly said, I think it's going to be really interesting. The thing that we'll all be watching is, where we have a Paxton opponent on one side and a governor's opponent, or a Paxton candidate on one side and the governor's candidate on another. Which one do voters side with? And to the extent that plays into this, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, but I think it's actually a three-headed horse here. You got Paxton supporters, Abbott school choice supporters, and then just the traditional conservative Republican that's out there. So, Annie, who does the business group go with?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I mean, I think you're going to see, I hate to, I want to align more of the Paxton supporters with sort of the diehard Trumpers, right? And so, you think of more of the business level-headed folks. And so, when I think of the Trump supporters, those are ones that no matter what Trump says, no matter what Trump does, they're going to be with Trump. And so I think in the same way, even if, and when Paxton is deposed, and no matter what the outcome is, they might still be loyalists to the end.
Mark touched on this just a moment ago with using the word distraction. There's a lot of infighting within the GOP. Holly, at the end of the day, this civil war, this cannibalism, within the GOP. Does this just spell doom in November for the GOP? All this infighting where they're attacking and hurting each other?
Yeah, I don't really think so. I think once the primary dust has settled, that they coalesce and work together. And I think to Annie's point, a lot of your business groups and the ones I talk to here in Houston, certainly, they're more interested in those policies, and they're going to get behind the candidates that are able to talk about the policies and be effective in creating pro-business environments for Texans.
Hanson, the eternal political optimist. What do you think, negative nanny Mark?
I mean, I think yeah, it at the margins, there could be a difference. I mean, it's not going to help. There could be some, marginal consequences in some of the handful, like 2 or 3 races that are actually competitive in November. So, we could see, 1 or 2 seats flip, and that may or may not be related to what's going on in the GOP primary. But the math kind of is what the math kind of is. Although, I would say that, from a business standpoint, I mean, you've got, Republicans and Democrats on really the same side on a lot of these pro-business issues. And so, I don't think that the general election is probably gonna make that much of a difference on, how the state approaches a lot of these, sort of pro-business, pro-incentive sort of issues.
Yeah, a lot of people like to say that the election is all about red versus blue, but is green the business group there, Annie, the peacemaker?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say we've seen this before with, excuse me, the infighting, and I had to say that this past session, regular session, we saw Republicans and Democrats come together on many issues, being workforce development and regulatory reform, and so I saw a lot of progress being made on those issues, and I am the eternal optimist in regard to that. So I see a lot of progress continuing to be made. I think that a lot of people continue to be distracted by the politics, but like Holly said, I think the dust will settle. We'll go into session, and it's incumbent upon the business and industry groups and even the education groups and to really kind of rise above that and make sure that those issues don't get clouded by the politics of it, and sort of move forward, educate the new candidates, and make sure that they understand the importance of those issues.
The polls also say that crime and safety are big issues for the voters. Here in the Austin area on our hike and bike trail, we had an attack involving a man with a machete, raising questions about safety in our big cities, rebooting the debate over police funding and mental health funding. Annie, is crime and safety the big issue for the business industry?
It's huge. I mean, you've heard more and more and more that retail theft has become a major issue, especially for small businesses. I hate to use this word, but you've seen progressive pushes to decriminalize issues such as retail theft, to theft at a price point of $750 and below would be decriminalized. So you're seeing people literally smash and grab in these small businesses. And I actually saw a video this morning at an Academy store in Houston, I believe, where they ran in, and in front of the customers and the actually people that work there, just let these guys go in and grab a whole bunch of product and run out and just stood there. But listen, you've got city councils that have become a little bit more concerned about progressive benchmarks and less concerned about community and the institution of the community. And, we do need to take care of our police and the values of the community in order to uplift our small businesses, because guess what? The small businesses are the ones that are the most likely to give back to charities and make sure that our communities really do have that institution that takes care a lot of. It's very cyclical, the mental health, getting people involved, and of course the safety issue by funding our police. But yeah, I mean, it's a big issue for our small businesses, and for the consumers. I mean, look, it's a lot easier to stay inside and shop online than it is to go out and shop when you're a little bit too scared to do so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a sleeper issue, but I think it's an underlying issue that maybe play out at the ballot box. You agree, Holly?
Oh, absolutely. And yes, that incident did take place in Houston, I believe, yesterday. And that also it feeds into that whole topic of, the number one concern of Houstonians certainly going into the Houston mayoral election was public safety. And although we've seen reports that crime is down, this is an example of why surface crime numbers may appear to be down. People are not necessarily reporting, and they're not necessarily prosecuting these, what some people call lower level crimes, to suggest that crimes like that, such as the smash and grabs and the below $750 limit for prosecution, that is not a victimless crime. Those business operators, sometimes the smaller mom and pop type businesses, really suffer from that kind of activity in the community. And I think that draws a lot of bipartisan concern about what we're doing as far as criminal justice goes in this country.
You agree, Mark? It's going to be a driver?
I mean, when it's finally cool enough to go outside, and now you have to worry about guys with machetes. This is one of those things that the city folks are going to tell you is maybe a bit exaggerated, but it is a potent political issue as well. And to the extent that the city folks can't get a handle on this and control it, there is going to be a downside consequence for progressive candidates on the ballot as a result of that.
The primary season is really about to kick off with actual voting taking place next week. And among those in play, Texas Congressman Chip Roy, who has been in the news this week on several big issues. He spent a lot of time in Iowa campaigning for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Roy also this week suggested the new House Speaker may need to go because of the big budget battle on Capitol Hill. And he's also called for the impeachment of the Secretary of Homeland Security because of the border crisis. For his political critics, though, Roy is like a greased pig at a county fair. You just can't grab him. You just can't nail him down. Some people call him a rhino. Some call him an extremist. Is he the big survivor in all this, Holly?
Oh, yeah. I think Chip Roy is always an interesting politician. He does not toe the line. He's always been very outspoken and vocal, and he doesn't neatly fall into one camp or the other. And he has brought forth some legitimate criticisms about the way Congress is handling the budget, about presidential politics. And he's just his own guy. I think that he garners a lot of respect from people, sometimes on both sides of the aisle, for his stances on these issues. And I think he's still very popular in the state of Texas.
Yeah, truly the political greased pig at the county fair. A lot of squealing, but you just can't catch him, right, Mark?
Well, he's unopposed in the primary, and it's a safe R district. The ex-president called for someone to primary Chip Roy after the deadline had closed, so he's not in trouble. Love him or hate him, he is a rare independent actor in Congress, as Holly said. And, he manages to stay in the headlines, and I think he's going to be with us for a while.
No downside for Roy there, Annie, that you see?
I was going to say, maybe instead of the greased pig at the county fair, he's the show pig vying for the blue ribbon. It seems to me well, first of all, I know him, and he said never met a stage or a mic he didn't like. It seems to me, with as much as lately, for sure, he's been on that stage. He looks like, especially as much as he's been around being kind of the spokesperson for DeSantis, that he might be vying for the running mate position. But he does seem to have that respect, and he's always been very verbose, and he's been really good at the spoken word. And so I don't know. We'll see how it plays out if DeSantis ends up making it that far.
Okay, we'll move away from the political forum, and I'll just say that'll do. Which movie, right? And let's wrap things up with our final word for the day. And Mark, we'll start with you. What's your final word?
Blustery.
Holly, wrap it up with the word this week.
Choices.
And Annie, close us out with the word for the week. What's your word?
Windbreaker.
And that is This Week in Texas Politics.